here we are. My name is Sam Mateosian. You guys have now met me, but not everybody has. I'm currently a VR filmmaker and entrepreneur, and I'm here with Nicole and Alia. So could you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah,
Sorry,
sure.
Elizabeth and Alia.
Okay. Do you want to go first? Go ahead. Okay. So I'm Elizabeth Spavento. I'm a curator and visual arts programmer here at Space, and helped organize the show, which is really just a combination of symbols and doesn't really have a verbal expression.
We can't even say it.
While in some interpretations it might be plus, minus, or positive, negative, or like some sort of symbol for spark or things like that. So I think it's interesting. This is the first time I've had to like talk about the show. So how do you talk about something that doesn't really, that has a name or like has more of an intuitive sense than it does like an actual category or descriptor?
It's like the artist formerly known as Prince.
Exactly. The exhibition, no, I don't know, symbolically known as plus, minus.
Cool.
And I'm Alia, and I'm the artist that was invited also by Elizabeth, who also runs the artist residency here, which I'd also like to kind of talk about. So I was here for 1 month, and I'm originally Yemeni Bosnian, but I'm also American, and I'm a multimedia artist. I work with mostly textile, but I'm a photographer. So photography and textile, in this case, I had the opportunity to really marry them into this large-scale installation. But I also wanted it to be something functional for what the space was. So to have a relationship with the curator for me is really important and who you work with. And so working with Elizabeth was amazing because from when we first met, when she came to visit my studio, she said you have to think about how this place exists.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where we are right now. I mean, you're familiar with space, of course. And so how do you see space?
Oh man, yeah, it's been a really sort of core piece of my Portland experience. I think it was brand new when I moved to Portland, and we didn't know what it was. And I had a friend who was doing a physical theater piece and wanted to bring it to Portland, and I had just moved here, and he said, well, you could do it over here, or you could do it at this Space Cat. This is this brand new thing. We ended up at St. Lawrence, but that was the introduction to space for me. It was like, this is the place where something experimental and really cool could happen, and we had no idea. And then I kept coming to shows, and it's always been just, I mean, I think it's the best stuff, generally, in Portland.
And now it's going to get better.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that we had talked about, because initially when I wanted to do it, I do kind of this traditional photography, and then I cover certain objects and fabric. But here it's a really living space. And it's not only music performances, right? It's theater. It's also sort of a bar. It's a meeting place. It's a screening place. So it's sort of nothing specific and yet everything, right? And that, in its sense, that's why when you were talking about the title, the title has to reach everyone, regardless of their linguistic barrier. So it's not only, it's a sign that is the plus, a barrier in a way, something that really highlights duality, highlights what's, we can even start off with the good and evil, the visible and the invisible, and that's what, those barriers, those borders that I try to address, I do so with the textile.
Right.
How familiar are you with this place, and do you, now that it's all covered, do you really remember what it was like before and all the details? And now you can't, because now there's this barrier there.
Yeah, but also just like the history of the fabric itself and the many lives that it has over the course of this whole project. A lot of what's in the photographs, so everything that's not black and white are textiles that Alia had purchased in Uzbekistan during a period of time when she was traveling all over the world. And so these prints are actually based on an Uzbekistan pattern, but printed in China, so they're a little bit tweaked.
So they had sort of crossed borders.
Yeah, they had crossed borders, they had undergone this translation, and originally when we had envisioned this space, we were like, okay, we're covering everything in fabric. Like the black paint wasn't part of it, you know. So we just really were very ambitious and quickly realized that we didn't have as much fabric as we needed. And luckily, we were able to connect with Design Techs, who generously helped donate a lot of the fabric that you see here in the States. And even their interpretation isn't quite spot on. Like there were just certain limitations of like taking a digital image and printing it.
Yeah.
So like you'll notice that this fabric doesn't have quite the same fluorescence as the images do. But at the same time, you know, still working with those notions of translation. So like now that it's gone from Uzbekistan to China, back to Uzbekistan, then to America, right? And then translated again from both like digital to like real printed material. There's so many different aspects. There are so many different borders that it had to cross, or different lives that it had to live in order for it to arrive at this moment. And
Very
even
well said.
still, like just the lighting, if you'll notice, like the stage is very fluorescent and blacklit. So there's certain elements of it that sort of live on in these different translations or different ways.
Yeah.
And the different parts of the pattern also can be, you know, you see it all at once, but also that they can be disassembled through the use of lighting. And another thing that I added in this was that I added an outline. And so when on certain UV light hits it, you only see these outlines, and it becomes a completely different fabric. So experiencing the space, you know, whether or not you're sitting on one of the chairs or looking at the photographs, or whether you're on stage yourself, because the idea is also to break the barrier of who's the audience, who's the performer, you know, who's on stage, who's at the bar, and in order to have one of them, you need to have the other, inevitably, right? So in different places, you experience the fabric in a very different way.
So how did you become interested in borders? What was there some aspect of your life that you moved around a lot?
It's always been a part of my, I mean, in one sense, moving around, I think a lot of people have, especially now in this day and age, a lot of people have moved around or live elsewhere that's not their native country, whether by choice or by not. And especially now, it's a very relevant issue with refugees and immigrants, also in a country that's built on immigrants, but then who's from away.
Yeah, and even here in Portland, right? It's a big part of our cultural experience, and so.
Or even just in Maine, the expression of being from away, like this sort of labeling of insider and outsider.
Totally drives me bonkers.
Yeah.
As a person who is from here or whatever, I don't know, first generation, but I find it so offensive that we have to label here versus not here.
Yeah.
Especially the place like the United States, where I can kind of understand in other places where in order to be from that country, you must be born there. Like in Yemen, where I'm originally from.
Yeah.
And in 1992, two borders from where I'm from, which was Yugoslavia at the time and which is South Yemen, were shifted. They changed and they were renamed. And that doesn't mean that the history isn't a part of it. It's absolutely a part of it. But for the next 3 years, my parents had to negotiate what was their book, what was their passport.
Right.
Because it suddenly became one of the countries united and the other one divided. You know, Yugoslavia became Bosnia, Serbia, and so on. And Yemen became just Yemen. North Yemen and South Yemen became Yemen. And so after that, we then came to the States more naturally. So what also interests me, we're not only talking about borders in terms of the physical borders, but also how that changes your liberties and your value. So if I were to be in another country right now, the fact that I have an American book, I will get evacuated if there's a problem.
Right.
But let's say, you know, my husband, who was Moroccan, maybe won't, and we do not have that same liberty, perhaps, at that time. Why? And that interests me. And that borders are man-made. There are these punctuations that we put in to instill power, you know?
And performance, too.
Absolutely.
And so much performance. You know, I think a border is really only there if you patrol it and if you walk it and if you give it power, if you act in it. And on like a totally other end of the spectrum, conceptual framework, you know, I think part of what this show does is it really addresses issues of borders in the architecture and the very space that you walk in that the idea of something being hidden or concealed underneath fabric sort of takes you to a different experience that you would of the space. And I think particularly knowing that this is a place for performance, that there is a stage, that you're sort of highlighted against this backdrop, you know, that all of these things kind of coalesce this idea of, you know, space is actually changing, or performance incorporating into notions of borders, and what kind of privileges or expectations are put on your way of thinking or acting in a space that is sort of immersed in this language.
And you're talking about language. I'm happy you said that, because that's, we're going back to what the title of this show is.
Right.
You know, and there's also, it's allowed to have that little bit of a frustration. People don't consider language in itself as a border.
Yeah.
It's very limited, not only of how our perspective and how we see the world, and how we can see one situation, but if we're coming at it from different languages, it's completely different. It's a different perspective.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be the, you know, the national languages of the nation. The thing that I've been thinking about, struggling with recently, is just the created pockets that we make through use of language. Like an in-group has its own particular set of language, and whether or not somebody feels like they're a member of that in-group or not is whether or not they speak that, whatever that. So like, you know, business executives have their own like jargony things, artists have their own sort of jargony things, filmmakers, everybody sort of, you know, software developers, everybody has their own little, even if we're all speaking English, their own mini construct inside of there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That keeps outsiders out. You know if somebody is in because they can speak your language.
Right.
Definitely.
And it can work also in the other way, you know, where it's also to create a community because you've been excluded. Like many of the Arabs who immigrated to France, for example, they ended up making a language called Berlin, which is, it means to switch. So it actually comes from l'envers. And they break the syllable and they put it on the other side. So milk, L-A-I-T, would be itla. And so to be able
like
to...
in French Pig Latin.
Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, I never picked it up, so I'm definitely not in on that one. But yeah, just as it does one, you know, to see it on the other. And so for this show also, I mean, there's in one case, I think we also spoke about how important it is to reach. I mean, this space brings in so many people, and not to have it exclusionary. That's kind of the point. Everybody to sort of find a place and be allowed to interpret it without being told. And I think good artwork or good films raise questions rather than present. We have so much anyway, which you're telling us so many things that tell us how to think, how to act, how to be. This is at least a little bit of a break from that, a little bit of a space to feel open to interpretation, whether or not you feel like you're an art connoisseur or not. You absolutely don't have to. It means something that can be accessible.
That's true.
Yeah, and even
I never even sort of realized that sort of boundary crossing that space has. Because I mean, it's Congress Street. That's like the full spectrum.
Yeah.
And on a First Friday, you can get any part of that spectrum, and it's not all elite art.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Exactly. It is a community space, and not only as a community space, but also my work in general. It needs to, and it's interesting, you know, when we look at photographs, and for me, I believe that the beginning of the work really is the opening, and then on. It's when the show is on, because all of that is this sort of pre-production, right? You're thinking about it. You have this intimate relationship with one person, talking about these ideas, trying to figure it out, and all the people who helped put the work up as well. But then it's also the reactions, and it's interesting that through the reactions you can look at one image, and 4 different people will have really different reactions to it. Even sometimes fear, anger, happiness reminds them of something, and that teaches me, because it teaches me through a different perspective, and through a different eye, basically, and it tends to feed me into, you know, kind of lead me to what I'm going to do next.
So how did you arrive here to the residency?
Well, Well, it was interesting. I actually,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I applied. I came to it first Friday
Uh-huh.
about a year ago or more, a year and a half ago, and I applied, and I don't think I would have been ready then. It's so interesting how things happen for a reason. And Liz contacted me when I was doing this last project, Borderland, and I was traveling, and she said, you know what, I really connected to your work. Now I'm working, you know, I'd really like to take this project on, and how do you work? And we had a lot of conversations.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting thing because there really hadn't been anybody at Space that was sort of a dedicated visual arts person for maybe about a year and a half before I took on the position. And so one of my first tasks was to go through all of the open submission applications that we had received over the course of, I don't know, almost a 2-year period.
Yeah.
And so I was looking at, you know, close to 100 different applications, and Alia's was one that I just felt really connected with the subject matter, and just the way that she had been creating images really reminded me in particular of a couple artists on the West Coast I was familiar with. And so during our initial conversations, there was sort of a little bit of sussing out, and at the time she was traveling and was in Japan, and I want to say...
And then Vietnam.
So
yeah. We were also talking across borders. And there was this,
yeah.
It was...
So the whole conversation was kind of like couched in this very international dynamic, and then when you were back, when Alia was back in Farmington, I drove up to do a studio visit with her and actually got to see a lot of the materials that she had collected from the different places, and we just sort of had a frank conversation about like, okay, here's the space, here's what I'm thinking, and then one of the really great advantages or great resources that we have here at Space is the residency room, and so there's 2 aspects of this overall project that the residency accomplishes, and one of them is for artists who are exhibiting like Alia, and then there's a whole other group of artists that are just here for independent practice, so they'll come in for like 2 to 4 weeks and make a body of work and then sort of ship out. And I think one of the luxuries of having an artist in residence who's also exhibiting is like you get to know that person in such a new way. They get to know that space in such a deep way that I think it would be very difficult to accomplish something on this scale of this size without having weeks to really be here and to think about it and to kind of attend events and see how people are using the space and really develop this relationship with it. You know, often people just fly in for like 5 days to a week to like hang out on the wall and then come back. So, and it's fairly challenging from a curatorial perspective to balance out all the needs that you would have as a visual artist against the needs that you would have for performance, right? So think about, you know, coming to a concert, like it's not going to be fun if all the lights are on, right? But if you're an artist, like you can't really look at your art in the dark. So where does that balance come in, and how do you create this atmosphere? How do you allow people to kind of enter into the work in a very physical way? And I think, you know, just literally having the luxury of time to be able to work with Alia and develop that idea over the course of, you know, the whole month that she was here is really how it arrived at this moment.
Yeah, I love the use of lighting with these particular pieces, like how that black and white just is so vibrant in that setting.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
And this one, just where the person who's wrapped is totally disappears until you move past it, right? You need the 3-dimensional, like walking past it, and then it emerges out of this space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
There's so much of these that sort of really play with that sense of depth, right? And I think that again goes back to this conversation we were having about borders and the title and these elements of duality where you're never really quite sure if it's 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional, if they're in the background or the foreground, and sometimes depending on where you are and how you approach the piece, it might look like they're actually coming out of the frame or in the frame.
Yeah.
So there are all these really interesting things that happen, not only just looking at the work, but through your physical relationship to it, you know, that in looking at it in of itself becomes a bit of a performance.
I think also I wanted to add a little bit about the residency itself, because this work would not have existed In fact, when we were talking about it, we talked about some of the fabric, but we also talked about maybe using work that had already existed. But when I came here, and a month, I mean, it depends on which way you can look at it. It could either be a long time or not. And for something like this, it's not a long time.
Yeah, a month really goes really quickly.
Yeah.
It goes by fast, but it can be the right time if you have the right recipe.
Mm.
And I think that's really important. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that, because you need to have somebody a little bit wacko to kind of do this, and she's a little bit, you know, and to believe in you. And I was like, oh my God, we're on it. And you know, and there was, of course, there's certain things, but it was never, that's never shooting down an idea. I mean, you're an artist as well, and you know, and I think it's, I mean, you know, in this setting and in this conversation, we're talking about Elizabeth as a curator. She's also an artist, and it's to understand how people function and what somebody needs. So when I came, this sounds like this is very basic, but the apartment, it's not, you know, a super luxurious place, but it's perfect.
Right.
It has everything, and it was built by artists, so people understand it. They understand there's great space that's in there. And when I came, I didn't even have to think about hair ties. There were hair ties that were, for me, there were toothpaste, everything. It was literally the next day. You can start the next day, so you don't have to worry about settling in or making a home. I moved the table around a little bit, and it was fine. And that gave me the opportunity to say, I was like, wow, so I have all this time. I'm actually going to shoot these photographs here in space. So everything here, the ideas were all born here, and it was through. So we really had the time to develop our, like, the dialogue that we wanted to have in this, and I think that's important. So in one sense, and it's also, this is a very hands-on. I'm very hands-on, and I like working with people who are hands-on, who are willing to try. So, and you were, you know, from the beginning, whether it was something about ideas, whether it was something about, you know, getting sponsorship, which is like a whole, you know, okay, we want, you know, you have this idea, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to try to figure out how. And for somebody who's coming in from, I mean, I'm only in Farmington, my parents are there, so I kind of come in and out, but I haven't been in the States for the last 7 years.
Right.
And so, and the fact that Liz herself is new to Portland, still like saying, no, we'll find a way, we're going to make it. Let's try to get back to that original idea. So to have someone champion you, to have everything ready and prepared, have it, you know, just to get stuff done, makes all the difference in the world. That's why this has happened. Otherwise, it really wouldn't. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Really,
thank you. It's been such a pleasure working with Alia, and I think a lot of this camaraderie really develops out of the sense that, like, you're creating a temporary home for somebody in the residency room for a whole month. So, you know, what would normally be maybe like a Skype meeting or like a business meeting over coffee becomes sort of an invitation to have dinner with somebody in the house, you know, that's right upstairs from your office. So it creates these really intimate and unique relationships, I think, that really lead into the work and allow there to be space to really get behind an idea. And so, you know, the residency room is really young to space. It's only in its second year.
And how novel is that in the world?
What do you mean?
I mean, is it, as a person who's applied to other residencies, I mean, have you seen anything else like this?
I've done several residencies, and they're in very different formats. And this one's it was very unique. And I think what you were mentioning about, it's integral. I mean, it's something that's worth. I'm so happy that you're also like heading it and that you're building, because you understand it and you understand. Yeah, it's very unique because you're right above your space. Not only do you have a studio, but you can come in and you can work at any time. If you're a night owl, you can come and work. You have a team here who is ready to also help you. You know, so if I needed something, they'll be like, okay, this is the person to do this. I have full access to all of the events. When I first came, immediately, you know, Liz and Gibson, who's the executive director, also put me in touch with people saying, we're proud of you. We're proud of our selection of you. We're excited about what you want, and we want the community to know. So they invited people in to meet me, which is humbling. It's incredible. And that immediately also gave me the opportunity to kind of immediately interact with these people. And become ambassadors of my work. And that's, on all levels, it was really spot on.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think what the novelty might be just the interaction that artists and residents at Space have with the community. It's so rare, I think, for somebody to come in and to have like an art production and feel really embedded in the surrounding community that it's
Yeah.
emerging out of.
Yeah.
And so I think that really provides the opportunity to like sink into it in a way.
Yeah. It seems like something that's special about the size of Portland and
Yeah.
the space's now sort of prominence within the arts community. It gives you a lot of power, you know, to access that network. The network's really dense because it's all sort of right here.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's a lot of opportunities. There's not bureaucracy. There's every reason for everyone to say yes.
Right.
Yeah,
to all
definitely.
this.
And not just, you know, and it's not just like, oh, the visual arts program that takes ownership over it. I think that there's a lot of buy-in across all the different things that we do across all staff members, you know. So they're, Mahmoud, Alia's husband, is an amazing musician. He's a master musician, plays 17 different instruments, and he was here for a few weeks of that residency.
Oh, cool.
You know, so it was really nice to see this other way that Alia was working with her partner and them sort of trading off who uses the space. So, you know, you'll be in the middle of a meeting talking about like, okay, well, what are the new marketing materials for this next big event that's coming up? And then you hear like Mahmoud playing upstairs and you're like, okay, yeah. So you have this like little moment of, it bleeds into your everyday experience, and I think that it's a really helpful reminder to just to say like, this is why we keep doing these kinds of things for those kinds of moments. And you know, I think to be in the arts in a lot of ways, especially these days, is a political act and requires a lot of fortitude and stamina and a lot of justification, you know, like
You have to fight for it a little bit.
exactly. You have to fight for it, and you have to sort of be declarative about why you're doing it, because I think people are always coming at you with that question, well, like, what's the value in it? What is it? What's its purpose, right? And so I think that these programs, like publicly and privately and professionally, all build justification in a certain way that builds its own set of value systems where you can say, like, it's valuable because we're able to produce something of this quality. It's valuable because we're supporting individual artists who are like in their career. It's valuable because the staff gains meaning from what we're doing because we can actually see it take place in front of our eyes. So, you know, I think that as much as it is a really great opportunity and boon for the artists who are there, I think it is just as important for the people who are administering it to really make it a part of that conversation around value.
Well, that was awesome. We covered a lot of
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't know how much is usable. But
Well,
Thank you so much.
It's
really.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely all usable. The trick will be to find, you know, the gem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
in all of that. So really, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come
Yeah.
and film and do this, because it also shows that, I mean, documentation in one sense is, you know, anybody can document, but there's also something about capturing the spirit and the soul.
the story.
And exactly, and when we're talking about something not being exclusive, this is a really big key. Thank you, because this
Sure.
is a way that we can
Yeah.
also send it outside of the United States. We can, you know, it can be something that's posted. Other people can
Right.
at least experience it and see a little bit that, you know, what Portland is. People, just as I could say, not a lot of people know what Yemen is. When I tell
That's
people
right.
about Yemen,
Yeah.
this is what Portland is outside in the rest of the world. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's this amazing. And especially my experience now, and most of the work that I've done was abroad. This is my first solo show in the United States, and it's the largest one.
Great.
So it's a really big thing, and I'm excited to share it. And you're making that possible. So
Yeah,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah.